What is the fastest you've seen a new coworker get fired? Before their first day in orientation, I got hired for a manufacturing job through Manpower, a temp agency. Me and a friend of my wife were both supposed to start on Monday at the plant for a week-long orientation. She got into a fender bender on her way there. She called them to say that she would be a bit late, that she just needed to wait on the police to give a statement. The manager told her to not even bother coming in. Girl was torn up. She took pictures and the police report into the hiring manager, tried to explain things to the company HR managers, but no dice. She was fired before ever clocking in. Honestly, that's just dodging a bullet career-wise. Or at least job-wise, might not be a career, but you know what I mean. That employer sounds like hell. Story 2. This was a while ago at my old job. New guy gets hired as a busboy. He was super annoying and tried to insert himself in everyone's conversations, whether they wanted him there or not. It only took a couple of hours for the whole restaurant to hate him. I was working the bar and he kept eating the bar fruit. I personally didn't care, but the manager did. Manager comes over to tell him to stop eating the fruit. He looks at the manager in the eye and eats another piece. Manager says, "Really?" Followed by, "Come with me to the office." New guy promptly replies with, "All right, man, calm down. I can tell you got that big dong energy for a good reason." Followed with cliche wink and nudge from his elbow. In front of me and like 4 other employees. I wanted to slam my face into the ice bin. It was so cringy to witness. He promptly walked out of the front door 10 minutes later without his uniform on. The worst thing about it was the manager was an insanely laid-back guy. Hell, the whole restaurant was laid back. You really had to try to get fired from this place. Had he not thrown in that big dong line, I'm almost positive he would have just gotten a slap on the wrist and kept the job. Story 3. I used to do a lot of field work on site investigation programs. Basically, we'd hang out on a drill rig while the drillers took rock cores. We would log the cores, take photos, and do some downhole tests, etc. New engineer gets sent to site and gets assigned to the night shift. Some people love the night shift, but most people don't, hence sticking the junior with it. After 5 nights, he calls the office and says he wants to come home because he's freezing and he hates it and he can't do it. Not clear to me if he quit or got fired, but it became plain pretty quickly that this job wasn't for him. I got pulled onto that program and I asked the drillers what the guy's deal was. They had a propane heater in the back of their van, and despite repeated invitations to sit there, Buddy just sat in his truck all night and shivered. In the middle of February. I feel like I've known people like this, though, who for some reason just will not accept help in any kind of, even though it's not help, right? It's just a better place to be at night. And they would just say, "No, I'm fine, and then complain about it. Story 4. Spent my summers in college working as a laborer for a construction company. Anyway, we were doing a bunch of renovation in an active hospital, so noise and dust were a huge concern. We were a small crew and just starting renovations on an area with a super tight schedule, so the company hired a subcontractor for some of the work. Enter these 2 clowns who show up to do some demolition work. Foreman gives them the talk about how they may be used to doing things a certain way, but this is an active hospital, so he'd rather the work take longer than for them to make a huge mess or a lot of noise. An hour later, we apparently got multiple complaints about the noise and the mess. So the foreman calls me up and says to go over there and clean up now, and that he would be by shortly to see what the hell was going on. These dudes had dust and broken wall everywhere. I could hear them halfway down the hall just smashing away without a care in the world. The foreman shows up and we walk into the room to witness this dude standing on a pile of rubble, swinging a sledgehammer over his head at a brick wall that he's removed the bottom from. Somehow the rest of this wall is still hanging from the ceiling. I have no idea how. Guy wasn't even wearing a hard hat, apparently oblivious that at any moment the wall might give way and crush him. The foreman lost his frickin' mind on these guys, kicked them out immediately, and got on the phone with their company and told them he didn't want to see these guys on site again. Lots of choice 4-letter words were used. Even threatened to fire the subcontractor entirely and get someone else to do the work. Story 5. My sister was fired one day. My dad had his own small medical practice and would hire me and my sisters as our first job to be his receptionist and file insurance claims, so we could get some workplace experience before we went job hunting in the larger world. My older sister worked for him in high school for a year. I worked for him for 2 years. Then it came time for my younger sister to take over. I brought her to work to start training and said the number 1 rule in the office was, at work, he's not dad, he's the doctor and the boss. She sassed him in front of a patient her first day, with all the venom and sarcasm a teenage girl can muster. He fired her on the spot and I had to drag her out of there. Mom told her at least she would get paid for the couple hours she managed to be employed. Story 6. We had a new guy come in, go through all of the training on starting in our factory, lock out, tag out, and all that stuff. Said he was an electrician. Then, the very first job he was asked to do, he was found working on a machine with the power locked on. There are so many things wrong with that in an industrial setting. It's unbelievable. My boss pulled him out of the machine and said, "You're too stupid to work here," and walked him out of the building. I think he was an actual employee there for 3 days at that point, and this was his first day actually on the production floor and not in training. Story 7. My document processing clerk was getting married and going on his honeymoon, so I got a short-term temp. It wasn't a temp to hire. Everything was out in the open through a legit temp agency who generally did pretty good screening. The temp's very first day, they show up with a box of things. Photos, mugs, office equipment, pen cup, task light, etc. Stuff to decorate a cubicle with. I advised them not to unpack, we're getting right into training. Within 2 hours after I cut them loose on a computer with a, "Let me know if you need anything or have any questions," they said, "This mouse is hurting my wrist. It gave me carpal tunnel. I'm going to need workers' comp paperwork." I made an immediate call to the agency ending this contract, then told the temp, "Your paperwork is at the temp agency office. Go ahead and see your rep there." They left their box of stuff behind. I had to have the temp agency pick it up. Well, that is just a misunderstanding of what carpal tunnel is and how it develops. Really though, just strange like sitcom behavior almost. What a weird thing to think you could get away with. Story 8. I worked in a restaurant for my first job in high school. I was about 16 when we hired on my coworker/buddy's little cousin. This kid was a year younger than me and a total craphead. No one liked him. His attitude and behavior issues were bad. Anyway, this kid gets hired and at first, he's chill. Him and I both loved the same band, so we had a mutual bond and common thing to talk about. Other than that, I couldn't stand him much. But during his first week, he starts to step on people's toes quite easily, because he notices some of us who are friends liked roasting each other. He thought he could join in, but the comments he was making weren't silly banter, it was full-blown rudeness. It made some of us get mad and get selective over when we would joke back and forth with each other. We also started to notice this kid didn't do his job properly either. He worked a dish pit, and his lack of proper cleaning of dishes, cutlery, and etc. threw everyone behind on their closing tasks because we'd have to ask him to rewash everything due to food chunks being all over things. After 2 to 3 weeks, a number of us complained to management. This kid's older cousin even complained about him, it got so bad. The last straw, I think, for him was taking this dishwasher sprayer and starting to spray people as they walked into the kitchen. He got screamed at by a number of us and was fired a few days later when it was brought to management and noticed how angry all of us were with this kid. That is a kid who has not had enough rules in his life. But I don't even know if that's true thinking about it, because there are kids who haven't had rules who act better than that. It's not hard. The bar is pretty low. Story 9. I owned a construction business, and we recently hired 3 new employees due to expansion. I didn't get to meet them yet, as my business partner was the one who interviewed them and watched them get started on their first day. Along with the newly hired, we promoted one of our best workers to manager to oversee them. So after a few days, I noticed that we were behind schedule on the job. That wasn't all too surprising because we had the new hires, but I decided it would be best to go in and check out to make sure everything was going well. So I call up my manager and tell him to go to a different site. We did multiple sites each day, and that I'll take over the place with the new guys. I arrive at the site half an hour late due to traffic, and everyone is already hard at work. And in fact, they're working efficiently and correctly on everything. I asked them a few questions about what they're doing and so on and get all the right answers. I figured the delay was just the first 2 days of learning, and I'm very pleased that everything was picked up and seemed to go well. Now, it is important at this point that I didn't actually introduce myself and nobody asked who I was. So it seems everyone just assumed I was another worker from the company they've never met before. So 2 hours before we're supposed to finish for the day, a guy comes over and says, "Hey, just so you know, we're all gonna head out now, but clock in that we worked the whole day. Manager allows it and the owners never notice." So, that is the story of how I fired 3 new hires on the first day I met them. And also, I had to fire our best worker. Yeah, that's just not great practice. Maybe if they were getting a whole day's work done, but they're behind. So get paid for the work you do, not the work you didn't, you know? Also just lazy. Unfortunate, because if they're doing all the right things, that means they were so close. So close. Story 10. Where to begin? One person didn't show up for their second day, citing culture shock, and then spent at least an hour each day complaining about everything to HR. They were gone inside of a month. Some other bloke refused to follow processes and called his manager an irrelevant woman in team meetings. Gone within a week. My favorite was technically a new coworker from my perspective only, as I had only just become aware of their existence. They interpreted, "We're going to retire that server from production," as, "We're going to throw the hardware off the roof into a skip," and proceeded to head down to the data center, power the thing off in the middle of the day, drive to his friend's office, plug the box in, and deploy a bunch of IVR scripts he derived from our proprietary scripts so they could run a bunch of psychic and frisky hotlines. He was gone within 10 minutes of getting that server back. Hey, that last guy? You can't say he's not enterprising. That man was out there to make some money, and he had a plan, damn it. Story 11. This dude showed up to run food at the restaurant I work at, and he never read the ticket and didn't make any salads. He dropped a platter of food, spent 70% of his time standing around doing nothing. He was the slowest dishwasher ever, and he took a water break every 2 minutes. My friend and I tried to drop him off, but he body slammed the door so hard the airbag sensor got disconnected. He ate the food my coworker made for me and then stood around and laughed when I got upset. He's 6'4", by the way, also 14. Anyway, my friend told him to leave because he wasn't doing anything productive, and he shouldn't get paid for wasting space. He cried and then never came back. I felt bad, but not really. Look, 14 is young. I feel like that's almost a pass, right? Like you'd prefer this person making these kind of stupid mistakes at 14 as opposed to, 20, right? If growth can happen, it can happen now. So I hope he grew. Story 12. I worked for a small city in LA for many years. I was on the board that interviewed for a new intern for the recreation department. We went through the process, made our choice, made the job offer to a nice, smart girl fresh out of college. She was a bit of a hippie, casual, relatable. It was fine. All accepted. The girl showed up with her gigantic pet python wrapped around her neck on the first day. She took casual to a whole new level, right back out the door. We hired candidate number 2 instead. I gotta know, what was she thinking? In what world is it bring your python to work day, dude? Come on. Story 13. This happened last week. New girl is hired and right off the bat starts telling me that she regrets taking the job, despite being unemployed for 4 months. All because there are so many people that it must be a bad job because of high turnover. Not really true. We just got bought out by a large company and they're hiring more people because we have more business. She tells us all about how it's her birthday and she's going drinking after work. Does a no-call, no-show the next day, which is her 3rd day. We all assume she quit. But the next day, she comes in and just starts to try to work like nothing happened. The supervisor asked, "What's up?" And she said she got in a minor car accident. He asked why she didn't call, and she said she doesn't have a cell phone, despite being on her cell phone constantly in the office. He decided to give her one more chance, but gave her a lecture about how she needs to communicate properly about missing work, and that one more incident will be an automatic firing. Next day, no call, no show. Story 14. 1.5 hours into shift as an animal care worker. I was showing my trainee how to clean the kitten rooms and started him on the easiest cage. We're talking neonatal, 6-day-old bottle feed kittens. I explained how to set up the kennel, clean them, etc. I turned around to grab some towels and a fresh hot water bottle when I heard a thump, and then another thump. Turned around and he was tossing the kittens to the other side of the kennel to move them, like underhand lobbing a softball, just tossed 3 kittens out of his way. I freaked out and yanked his butt down to the supervisor's office. His excuse was the kittens were attacking him, and he felt threatened, so he threw them. No warnings, fired on the spot. The kittens all were fine and got adopted a few months later. 2 happy endings for one story. OP, you're too kind. What a piece of garbage. Or maybe just an idiot, who knows. Story 15. We got a new contract for 2 receptionists to sit at our front desk. The company did not send their sharpest knives in the drawer because it was a low-dollar contract for only 1 year. You could consider the positions temporary. They sent a guy that my security manager called Sticks. He was incredibly malnourished and thin. We had a front door that was double door paned glass. I always exited through the side door and would look in through the glass doors every day when I left for home. On Styx's second day, I looked in through the glass at the dark reception area and saw one of the office chairs behind the reception counter as it slowly spinned. I entered back in through the side door and came back into the back of reception. I found Styx laying on the floor with an ergonomic office chair that had fallen on top of him. His head was bleeding from where it struck the floor or some other object. Also in my peripheral vision, I saw a can of compressed air, the type for cleaning keyboards. Styx said he was perfectly fine. I helped him up and sent him home. Over the next few days, other admin folks reported to me that they kept finding Styx collapsed in the reception area when no one had been around. I finally called his corporate supervisor to come take him away. When the supervisor arrived, Styx had locked himself in the supply closet and refused to talk to me. I could hear him huffing air behind the door. The supervisor talked to him through the door and finally escorted him back to company headquarters. They fired him. I called the company and I learned that Styx was a former service member who had served in combat. Looking at his resume, I knew he was also a former EOD team member. I suspected he had substance abuse problems stemming from PTSD and head trauma. I still had his contact info, so I contacted him a week later. From then on, I coached him every day until I finally got him an appointment with a volunteer from AM Vets, who got him and his family help and care. Today, I wish I knew where he was. This was more than 5 years ago. I hope he took advantage of the help that was offered to him. What a beautiful, amazing, compassionate thing to do, OP. What a feel-good ending to a story that I thought was just gonna be kinda sad. Shout out to you for trying to do the best for someone who is in some sort of crisis, because addiction is a crisis. Story 16. Backstory. I met a dude through another dude, and he and his pregnant girlfriend had nowhere to go. I had an insane amount of acreage, and I felt bad for the guy, so I let him stay in his RV on my land, and I even hooked him up to running water and electricity, all of which I paid for. He had a part-time job delivering furniture and never made enough to pay me the paltry $100 he promised every month for helping them out. When I would confront him, he would tell me he just never worked enough hours to provide for his girlfriend and pay me. I mean, I'm sure the copious plumes of marijuana smoke coming from his RV, which was tiny and contained his pregnant girlfriend, didn't help matters. I blaze too. This isn't a judgment on toking, but a judgment on not paying your rent before toking. So proactively, I got him a job at the hardware store I was an assistant manager at until I finished my degree. This was 11 years ago. He came to work and after 2 hours on his first day, just left. Walked out, went back to the RV which was parked next to my house, never said anything, and never returned. Told me it was a BS job that was beneath him. It seriously ruined my reputation at that store, but luckily it wasn't my career path or anything. People this ungrateful for generosity blow my mind. Dude, you have no idea how much worse it could be out there? OP is a saint. Story 17. 2 weeks. We'll call her L. She was the first person I hired in my first management job. Her resume looked good and interview went well, so she was hired on the spot. She seemed to pick things up quickly. Then she asks for shorter shifts because her cat went missing, and she wanted more time to look for it. No problem. But now she's only working 20 hours. Then the owners start complaining about her. One said she was very rude to a friend of his and said she constantly seemed in a daze, needed to be reminded of how to do basic tasks, and that she smelled. He thought she was going through withdrawals when he found her crying and shaking in our office area. The other said she was essentially useless during busy times and would stand around instead of finding ways to help. Schedule time comes around and main boss man says to just leave her off and not bother talking to her, since she was beyond help. She was rightfully pissed, but then got mad at me for not giving her hours, when she was the one who asked to be scheduled less. Main boss man told her he didn't know why she wasn't scheduled, even though he was the one to make the call, so I had to cover for him. It was an absolute train wreck of a job that I quit back in July. I should have seen major red flags when boss man threw me under the bus and lied to this girl about her job performance. Oh, it's one thing to cut back on someone's hours because they're doing a bad job and they kind of suck. It's another to, as a boss, making this decision to lie about it. That flag is crimson, my friend. I'm glad OP's not working it anymore because, that sounds like a nightmare. That being said, the worker doesn't sound too great either, admittedly. Who knows what their deal was, but hey, OP's out of there, not OP's problem. Anyway, that is all the stories we have for today. If you have any stories of your own, I'd be interested in hearing them. I feel like this is a pretty good Ask Reddit prompt, and I know there's going to be at least one of you where this person was you, so make sure to share that too, even if it's embarrassing. We don't know who you are. The embarrassing ones are the most fun. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.